Okay, so this video is going to be on identifying the different types of bike parts that make up your bike. They transfer from one bike to another. Some bikes have parts that other bikes don't have, and so there's some variance, so that's why I have both bikes out here. That happens to be my first bike. That's a Trek Hardtail, and this is my current bike, my Giant Anthem 29er, which I ride when I'm feeling well enough to do so. So I'm going to go over some parts that are kind of a mystery. When I first got into mountain biking, I didn't know what the heck a seat stay was, or a chainstay, or bottom bracket. So I'm going to help the newer mountain bikers out a little bit and show you guys what these parts are, what they do, and how to identify them. So you don't go and say, hey, my seat stay is kind of messed up, can you fix it? And they work on the wrong thing, and you know, you're wasting a lot of time. And it could actually be a safety issue. So we'll get into it. This right here, this is what's called your top tube. Okay, and your top tube's important because when you're buying a bike, you want to find out what your effective top tube is. Effective top tube, if I may be mistaken, but it's from a point just above here to this point here. Now, don't take my word for that. Look it up, but you'll find that your effective top tube length is the important part in determining size, which is funny because bikes are usually sized by the seat tube. Okay, you'll find a 16-inch, 17-inch, 19-inch, 20-inch bike. Extra larges will be 21 or 22 inches. They're going from this point down to your bottom bracket here, which is a good indicator of size, but it's not the most important thing when figuring out the size of your bike. Which complicates the whole issue further, but we'll move on. This down here, this is your bottom bracket, and this is where your crank goes through, and you can see, I think you can see, you can see right through it. This is a 3-piece crank. There are some bikes, if you've got a 1-piece crank, I'd kind of avoid it. That's an indicator of not being a real good crank set. But you can see this is a press fit bottom bracket, which means that the bearings are pushed into the bottom bracket and the crank goes through there. It's a real good design. And these are your crank arms. These are your chain rings here. I've got 3 of them here. Some bikes only have 1 or 2. This one has 3, and I kind of like it that way. This here is your shock mount, and it also happens to be a pivot. This is your shock, which is different from your fork. Those are 2 very different components, so that's important to know. This right here, there's another pivot. This bike has several pivots. An indicator of old technology will be a single pivot back here. It won't have the double pivot. And a single pivot really, they just don't perform very well. And I'll go into suspension details on another video, but looking for these dual pivots here is a good indicator of good suspension. This is your derailleur, your front derailleur. And you've got, as you come back up here, I'm going to move toward the front of the bike again. This right here, okay, this line is different than this line. This is a cable line. This is for the derailleur. This is your brake line. This is actually a hydraulic line. Okay, so as we come up here, I'll go into that again, but this here is your head tube, okay, which includes your headset. Now your headset is basically a couple of bearings. This is a tapered head tube, so it's got a smaller bearing up here and a larger bearing down here. And these tapered head tubes are really nice because it makes the steering much more solid rather than just a standard head tube. This here is your crown. Now, oh, and your steer goes down through here. Okay, your steer is part of your fork. So your steer comes down through here, and you've got these spacers here too. Now these spacers, if the handlebars are too high for you, you can loosen this up, take this plate off, take one of these spacers, put it on top, slide the whole thing down, put it back together, and you've lowered your handlebars. So that's one of the little adjustments that not everyone knows about. So that's handy. Come down here, we talked about the stanchions. You'll notice different types of forks. You'll notice different numbers like 32 millimeter and 34, 36, 42, all these different size millimeters. What they're talking about is the size of your stanchions. This is a 32 millimeter. Okay, it's 120 millimeters, or it's 100 millimeters of travel, which is this measurement, but the width of the stanchion is what they're talking about when they're talking about the 32, 34, 36. You know, for example, my brother has a Yeti with a 36 millimeter stanchion, so it's a bit wider, and it makes it even more cushy and more stable, believe it or not, but it also adds weight. But anyway, that's what that is. We come down here. This is your brake rotor. Okay, this is a through axle. Now, a through axle, to give you an idea, if I don't knock over my bike here, a through axle unscrews like this. Okay, and then the whole axle slides out. Okay, and then you put it back in, but it's different from a normal dropout, which a normal dropout has a brake right here. Okay, you notice this whole thing is, it completely encloses your axle rather than having a dropout. Okay, I'll show you that on the other bike. What that does is it improves performance and steering and stability. It's a really nice option to have. If you can have through axles front and rear, that's great. This bike has a through axle up front and a dropout in the rear. It's a nice setup, and I really like it. And so as we move on here, this is your hub here. Okay, this is where all your bearings go, and this is where the axle slides through. Hubs are important. There are some very expensive hubs out there, but you'll hear people talk about, you know, wheels and wheel sets. Okay, your wheels. This is your rim. Okay, there's your spokes. This is your hub. Okay, now if you see wheels for sale and you see a wheel set for sale, those are two different things. You know, you've got your wheels, and you know, sometimes they'll include the spokes and sometimes not. But then you have your axle. A wheel set is your wheel, your spokes, and your hub set. So that helps knowing when you're trying to buy something, because if you're expecting a whole wheel set and you're just getting the wheels, that can be an expensive mistake. So anyway, moving on. We'll move on back toward the back of the bike here. We've gone over the pivots. Now this is another one of those things. This is a seat stay. Okay. Now they call this a seat stay because in traditional bikes, this came up and mounted here. Okay, and kept the seat in position. And then this down here is your chainstay, and this keeps your chain set up. And this, in a typical hard-tailed bike, this would be attached here. Okay. And this is a dropout. As you can see, this comes loose and the whole wheel assembly drops out. Of course, you got your rotor, and your brake pads are in here, and this is your caliper, and again, these are hydraulic lines. That's your rear hub, which is going to be different than your front hub. They're designed differently. That's your cassette and your rear derailleur. That's my chainstay guard there, my little lizard skin that I talked about in another video. This is your seat post. These are your seat rails and your seat, of course. I think that's most everything I can think of. I'm going to show you some differences on the other bike. Now, as you can see, this is your seat stay. It actually holds up the seat. On the other bike, it didn't. This is your chainstay. You can also see my chainstay has been destroyed by the chain. Comes down and slaps that. And that's why I have the lizard skins on there. Really helps. And as you can see here, the bottom bracket on this bike isn't quite as substantial. It works. It's not a horrible setup, but the other one I really like a heck of a lot more. Now, on this bike has calipers. If you're looking to get into mountain biking, I would avoid a bike with calipers because, let me tell you, the braking is just not there. And for these types of bikes, you know, to take the wheel off, you got to pull off this setup here. If I can do it while I'm on camera, and you do that, and then you can take the bike off, or take the wheel off. Also on this bike, you can see this is a non-tapered head tube. Okay, so it's not quite as strong, doesn't quite feel as stable. And this is also what you'd call a coil-sprung fork. This fork has coils in it. There's no air. The difference is substantial. And you can also look at the size of the hubs here. not quite as beefy as the ones on the Giant. And you know, this was a beginner bike. And I want to say too, this isn't a bad bike. I mean, if you had to start out with a bike, this isn't bad. You know, you can go out and ride, and it's going to be all right. But the difference from going from this bike to that bike, it's outstanding. So anyway, that's just my general thing. Hopefully that helps a few of you new guys. I know what it can be like. You know, you're going into a bike shop and they say, "Oh, it looks like your bottom bracket's acting a little funky." Okay, what's that? Now you can have an idea, and you can hopefully speak a little bit more intelligently in your bike shop, and hopefully avoid some mistakes and talking about some things that you think are wrong, and it ends up being you're telling them the wrong thing. Or when they're saying, "Oh yeah, the top tube was messed up," you know what they're talking about now. So hopefully that'll help you guys. You know, if I missed anything or if there's anything that's a little goofy, let me know. I've been known to make mistakes from time to time, but hopefully that'll really help you get a good grasp on this, because it's, you know, in the beginning it's a foreign language. So anyway, thanks guys, and thanks for watching. I appreciate it.